Hey, Fatheads, welcome to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings. This is episode 27, DRAM Cask number 1, Whiskey Pairing. We're going to get a little looped, a little tore up. We're continuing our trend of whiskey pairing after 5 weeks of beer pairing. Thanks very much for tuning in, whether you're tuning in live or whether you're listening to our podcast. Heard around the world, we are broadcast live at cigarfederation.com. I am here, as always, with my co-host, Robbie Rass. Rob, what is going on, brother?
What's happening, John? Things are good, man. It's raining out here in California, which is
It's probably a good thing, isn't it?
that's absolutely a good thing. You know, we actually it was a couple weeks ago that the governor mandated that everybody use 25% less water, and that's the first time in the history of the state, as far as I know, that that's ever happened. Because we are fakatched when it comes to water supply. So yeah, getting a little bit of rain is good. I'm excited to get into these cigars. Want to thank DRAM Cigars, kind of an informal sponsorship of the show, giving us some samples so we can pair these out and share them with you guys. Hopefully we'll be doing some more stuff with them in the future, and I'm definitely doing DRAM. We're doing Cask number 1. That's what we're smoking today. That's what I'm smoking. I really dig these bands, by the way.
It's classy.
Yeah, it's a very cool look. And then we'll have Cask number 2, Cask number 3, and I think Cask number 4, we'll get our hands on that one pretty soon. Which is
baby.
Blended by EP Carrillo. So we've got a few shows coming up, so that's going to be fun.
So, I mean, I'm excited for all these, you know, being the whiskey fiend that I am. We just did a Japanese whiskey show, which was really well received. You know, we did 5 weeks back-to-back beer shows, which was fun. But I think we kind of talked about the fact that, you know, it's nice to break it up, and it seems like forever since we've done a whiskey show, and I say that after even doing a whiskey show last week, which is unusual for us. But I already reviewed this this cigar. If you haven't already checked it out, check it out on cigarfederation.com. As Rob knows, I'm a bit stingy with the scoring, so since we're informally sponsored, you know I'm not on the take here when I say that got a hard 90, and you can look back through my my scoring history and see that I don't give out higher 90 or 90 plus is I mean, that cigar has really got to work me to get a score like that. And for those who are familiar with our scoring system, that's a box split, and that is a legitimate box split for me. I would go deep on those. I would go to town and pairing. I really enjoyed it. They're made by C&C Cigars, so we're smoking the DRAM Cask number 1, and I agree with Rob that I really like the band. They're quite classy. You know, you see a lot of different band art out there, and I think I wouldn't call it simple, but I would call it elegant with the white and the gold and the blue. Stands out really well. Not a lot of information on the blends, and maybe we can squeeze some of that information out of Joe at C&C Cigars. But all I was able to find out is it's Connecticut shade wrapper, which is kind of obvious looking at it and smelling it, and it's from the Dominican Republic. That's what we know.
That's all we got. The label on it, actually, the band, it reminds me of something that you would see on a bottle of whiskey. And I don't know if that's going to translate well because the light's picking it up a little bit funky, but it gives you kind of the breakdown. It's Cask number 1. Whiskey that you should pair it with is like a citrus or a woody flavor profile. The profile of the cigar is creamy, and it's the strength is mild plus. They call it a double Connecticut. I'm assuming that means it has a Connecticut binder as well, but I don't know. That's just a guess on my part. But I've gone, I don't know, third of the way through, and I've just been smoking the cigar on its own. I haven't paired it with anything except water yet. And when John posted up on Instagram where he said he really wanted to see my reaction when I smoked it, this is a good cigar, just on its own.
Yeah.
It's got that creamy profile that everybody knows that I like. You know, mild plus in strength. I wouldn't even call it a mild plus at this point. I would just call it mild.
It's pretty mild.
It could be a plus to someone else. I mean, it's the tiniest amount of spice that lingers on the tongue a little bit. There's some really nice cedar notes in there, and that kind of, I call it a nougaty kind of sweetness that, nougat that you get out of that nice Snickers bar, a little bit of peanuts in there. sans the chocolate and the caramel, of course. But there's some really nice stuff going on with the cigar. I'm enjoying it, just on its own.
Now, for those who haven't already checked it out, you can go to dramcigars.com. They have a really cool profile on each of the cigars, along with some suggested pairings, which we really appreciate. Dram cigar number 1 is citrusy woody. They recommend some pairings of a Glenmorangie, which Rob will be drinking tonight. The Balvenie, the Balvenie 15 single barrel, which I've had. I mean, I've had most of these. Dewar's White Label, which I think you had on the shelf, and maybe we'll pour a fourth. Who knows? And Glenfiddich 12, which I've had on more than a dozen occasions. Then, of course, the cask number 2 is woody spicy. Cask number 3 is spicy smoky, and cask number 4 would be the heater, which is really designed to be paired with Islay whiskey. So that's woody smoky, and that'll be something else when we get to that point. I'd be lying if I said that that's probably the cigar I'm looking forward to the most, even after smoking number 1 and being blown away.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to all of these, and I think I'm looking forward to them now just as cigars because this one's pretty good. But I'm really interested in doing some of these pairings because, I mean, obviously, I like whiskey. You like whiskey. Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. I mean, the paychecks are good.
So fat. I mean, just dump trucks of money.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What did this show cost you? This show is sponsored by you too, because you're the one who.
This show is also sponsored by me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I and just wait until IPCBR, brother, because I'm gonna bring some. It's gonna be filthy how deep we go in the whiskey at IPCBR. But I bet. I mean, if I looked at the whiskey I sent as a bottle, I mean that's like conservatively just north of $300 in whiskey. I mean, granted, we're not drinking $300 in whiskey tonight because we would die live on the air. But I mean, you can't. Yeah, I mean, these are not, unfortunately, these are not available in mini bottles, so you can't just go out and buy mini bottles like you can with bourbon. You got to buy 700 milli or 750, and I'm prepared to do that because I like whiskey that much.
Yeah, yeah, definitely some good stuff going on in the coming shows. So I'm ready to get started. Which one are we doing first? Actually, you know what? I asked you. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off completely. I asked you a question off air, and I wanted to ask it on air. I asked you first to kind of give you a heads up. But when we're doing whiskey shows, and we've got the DRAM glasses, I always pour everything in advance. Like I'll come out and we're setting up, and John and I will hop on about a half hour before the show, and BS, catch up a little bit. I find that I the first thing I do is sit down and pour everything, and I don't really know why I do it. I feel like, is it supposed to breathe? Is it not? Does it matter? Does it have an impact? So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
So as you all know, I have been to more than my fair share of tastings. And in fact, I have another tasting scheduled this week because I love whiskey. And I've been told on multiple occasions from people who are way smarter in the whiskey world than I am that there is such a thing as, it's called a bottle shock. And what they mean by that is that the proteins and some of the elements, the molecules and the components that make up that whiskey, they're shaking around and they're not in their ideal place for tasting. I used to think, okay, yep, sounds like some hippy dippy crap to me. But I've tasted whiskey that's fresh from the bottle. I've tasted whiskey that's been poured and left to sit for 10-15 minutes for a rest, and I can say with confidence, according to my palate, you should absolutely pour a whiskey, go away, do something, read something, come back and take a sip, because I think there's definitely some truth to letting the whiskey sit. So when we do a whiskey show, I try to pour 15-20 minutes before the show, really to give the whiskey the best chance at bringing its true character forward, I think.
So unbeknownst to me, I was doing the right thing.
You're just a natural, Rob.
It's better to
natural
be lucky.
Whiskey drinker.
Better to be lucky than good is what people tell me.
Hell yeah.
Which sucks because I'm good at everything.
What can you say, superstar? A beer is coming along nicely, by the way. So before we, because we're going to get into the first whiskey, which is the Glendronach, and I just want to recap for some of our listeners out there. Now, I know you guys have listened to some of our former shows, but I just want to quickly, because you guys know I love to read some of the research behind whiskey, the drinks, the beers, whatever we're pairing. So I just want to quickly remind you, we're drinking Scotch tonight. What does that mean? It's a product made in Scotland. Obviously, it's Scotch. It has to be made in Scotland. It can only be made from water and malted barley. How you malt that barley, there's obviously a lot of different techniques behind it. You can use peat, you cannot use peat. The only exception to water and barley for additives is E150 or caramel coloring, which is supposed to be tasteless and just adds a consistent color to the whiskey. Most company, or I shouldn't say that, not all whiskey companies do this. If they do this, you won't see an indication on the bottle. What you will see on bottles where there is no caramel coloring is that it is naturally colored, which means that the whiskey comes this natural color. And if it says non-chill filtered, that means the whiskey has not had some of the critical elements filtered out to make it less cloudy if you add water. Has to be matured in Scotland, so even though you've distilled it in Scotland, it still has to be matured in Scotland, and it has to be in oak casks, so specifically oak casks for a minimum of 3 years. So it can't be sold as Scotch unless it's been 3 years. And last but not least, it has to be 40% ABV minimum. And that's Scotch.
There's going to be a test later.
Well, I'm going to talk about some of the more nitty-gritty details about whiskey making, because we haven't really got into whiskey making. We've talked a little bit about stills. We've talked about washbacks at the Japanese show. But we've got some more details. But let's hop right into the Glendronach.
Let's do it.
The Glendronach 12. It's got nice artwork. Classic. So what does that mean? That means that this is a minimum of 12 years old. So it could be older than 12 years. There could be some 17. There could be some 20. You don't know. But at the minimum age whiskey that is in there is 12 years old. Glendronach is a Speyside distillery founded in 1826. So it is one of the older distilleries. They employ, because we talked about this in the Japanese show, they employ 2 wash stills and 2 spirit stills, which is pretty standard. You can tell they're equal quantity because you basically want to run it so that it's 1-to-1 the amount of spirit you're producing in your wash. You want to run it through your spirit still, which we'll talk about later. They produce a pretty good amount, 1.3 million liters, which is 343,000 freedom gallons for our American friends, which is most of you. They're owned by Ben, and I'm going to horribly mispronounce this, Ben Reich Distillery. The original distillery was actually destroyed 10 years after it opened and then rebuilt. Obviously, back in the 1800s, there were some issues with fire, and they hadn't quite perfected not setting your distillery on fire from production. It's owned by the.
You'd want that.
Okay.
It seems like that would be like job number 1. So how can we do this without burning the place down?
Don't burn the place down. Yeah. Rule number 1.
Step 1.
Rule number 2 is produce good spirits. So they were owned by the Glen Grant family, which owns a lot of different distilleries until 1960, and they sold it. What was interesting is that they used coal-fired stills instead of gas-fired stills or steam-heated stills until the late 1960s, which is actually unique in the industry. There was only 3 distilleries that did that, and that was Glendronach, Glenfarclas, and Springbank. And what does that matter? Well, because the coal actually imparts a different level of heat, which changes the spirit, and it also embodies some sootiness to the whiskey. So if you could get your hands on some old spirit that was made back then, and I know there's casks of it out there, it's got some peaty, odd, unique flavors to it. Distillery was mothballed in 1996 and then reopened in 2002. So if you can find any Glendronach that is pre-1996, you're gonna find that it's got some peaty quality to it because, if I remember right, they actually used coal to malt their barley as well. So they used a combination of coal and peat. So it is slightly peaty, a 14 ppm, which is a measure of peatiness. So it's slightly peaty. Then lastly, they were acquired in 2005 by Pernod Ricard, which became, so that acquisition made them the second largest distillery company as a whole in Scotland, number 1 being Diageo. And last but not least, they were acquired in 2008 by Ben Reich, which is the company we know today. A little history.
You're you're good at this, man. Like it's just funny. I'm sitting here and I already got to get into what is Glenrodich?
Glendronach?
Glenrodich, that's how you say it. And I'm already sipping on it, and I'm just sipping on it and smoking my cigar and thinking, man, this is a damn good pairing. And just listening to your dulcet tones, like it's kind of fun for me.
The
it's
dulcet
like
tones of whiskey talk.
I don't know, it's fun for me, but I will say that this first pairing is pretty damn good.
So what's interesting, let's see if I can get my camera back here. What's interesting about the Glendronach, which is what we're drinking, pronounced Glendronach, actually, not Glendronach, Glendronach, so it's Gaelic. It's 43% ABV, so a little bit higher than the minimum standard. 43% is actually pretty standard for a lot of whiskeys in the industry. You'll find just as many entry-level whiskeys at 40 as you will at 43 in my experience. I'm going to get the tasting notes here. I was initially getting a lot of citrusy notes, like orange rind, orange peel, but it's very delicate and very light. And what's interesting about the Glendronach is that it is matured in both bourbon and sherry. And I say that's interesting because it doesn't have a really dominant sweet sherry profile, which I would expect from a whiskey finished in sherry. What are your initial takes on the whiskey now that you've had a couple chances?
The nose that I'm getting from it is very bright and it's very clean.
Yeah.
When I say clean, it's when I've got a cigar going, it's kind of a smoky room. I mean, there's a fan and the windows are open, but when I lean over and take a pull on the through the old nostrils there, that's all that I smell. It just clears everything right out. Nice bright smell, kind of a softness to it, a soft sweetness to it as well. And I would describe the flavor profile the same way. There's kind of a bright citrusy note that you're getting in there. There's a soft sweetness there as well. It's not very pronounced sweetness like you were saying. And again, I know 1/90th of what you know about this stuff. And when you told me that this was in a sherry cask as well, it surprised me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I love sherry whiskeys, and when I was initially looking at some of the things to pair it with, this bottle stood out for me because when DRAM Cigars made the recommendations for pairing, they're looking for something citrusy, woody, and delicate. And I looked at this whiskey and I went, you know what? I know it's not in the recommended lineup, excuse me, but this fits perfectly within the range. Because it is delicate. It's not a full-bodied explosion of flavor in your mouth. I would say it might even have a tiny little bit of spiciness at the end, but it's so subtle that the sort of fruity, soft, vanilla notes of it overpower that. So they list the tasting notes as rich and creamy, silky smooth, warm, rich oak, which I'd agree. I'm definitely getting some of the oakiness. Sherry sweetness. I'm not really getting the sherry sweetness. Again, I think it's really subdued for sherry. A full mouthfeel. So I would agree. It's kind of got an oily, a thick mouthfeel. Not a super syrupy mouthfeel, but definitely a full mouthfeel. You were saying that.
Yeah.
They say raisins and soft fruits, spicy with a medium length and dry finish. Definitely getting the dry finish.
Yeah, I think I buy into a lot of that. There is. And I don't know if I'm getting it from the whiskey or if it's a combination of the two, because I didn't taste the whiskey on its own. I probably should have. But I'm definitely getting a nice vanilla sweetness on the finish, and I think it's coming from the flavors of the cigar because it's after I exhale the cigar through on a retrohale. I'm getting some of that sweetness on the tongue. Definitely getting that raisiny kind of flavor in there as well. That soft fruit, as they said. For going off the playbook as far as the specific recommended whiskeys, I think you nailed it here with this. I mean, this to me feels like exactly what they were trying to accomplish with the blend of this cigar. They balance each other out really, really nicely. They're delicate, soft flavors. There's a little bit of that citrus bite to it, and like you said, there's a little bit of a spicy finish on the whiskey itself. Very, very mild, but you can still feel it a little bit on the tongue. But it's, I mean, much more mild than, you know, something that's got more of a kick to it. But they really do set each other off really, really nicely.
And I would say that as I take a little bit more whiskey in my mouth and sort of roll it around, I am getting a little bit more of the sweet sherry influence, but again, it's very subdued, very delicate. On the retrohale, on the DRAM Cask #1, I am starting to get that chocolate that I was getting in my review, and I'm not sure if that's because the whiskey is bringing that character out, or maybe I'm just far enough into the cigar to start picking that up again. But in my review, I found the chocolate really built in strength as the cigar went on. So by the time I got to the halfway point, the 2/3 point, there was a ton of chocolate coming through. And, you know, to me, everything seems to be in balance. That is, the whiskey's not overpowering any of the character elements of the cigar. None of the cigar elements are overpowering the whiskey. And so far, I'd say this is a win for me. This is exactly what I want to do on a spring day: is sit out on a deck and enjoy this DRAM and the cigar.
Yeah, it's the pairing is real nice, and you mentioned a chocolate in there, and I didn't really taste that at first. And I'm not really tasting a ton of it now. I'm getting it kind of on the sides and almost underneath the tongue a little bit.
It's like a cocoa powder almost.
Yeah, it's there. I think if you wouldn't have mentioned it, I don't know if I would have picked up on it, because to me, for me, it's very, very subtle.
Very subtle.
I'm getting more of a vanilla sweetness with some of that creamy and the cedar from the cigar. I think there's an oakiness to the Scotch as well that doesn't really play too much into it for me. It's kind of in the background. But yeah, this pairing could be something that I would definitely do again. I'm really enjoying the cigar, which I'm not surprised by it at all. One thing we've learned when the only thing we've learned this from is the previous shows that we've done, but cigars that I've had in the past that are blended for a specific purpose haven't necessarily done all that well on their own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit surprised at how good the cigar is by itself.
Just a reminder to our audience, you were listening to Sharing Our Pairings, episode 27, DRAM Cask #1, Whiskey Pairing Live, broadcast on cigarfederation.com. If you're not listening live, you're listening on our podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to get your Q&A questions in each week. We appreciate that audience interaction. Sponsored by DRAM Cigars. Check out their website, dramcigars.com. We're enjoying some whiskey pairings. And, I mean, I know we got 2 other whiskeys to go through, but I'm ready to throw in the towel. I'm ready to just, sit back and just keep drinking this and enjoying the cigar for the rest of the night, and I'd be a happy camper.
Just pull the Costanza and go out on a high note.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or who was it? John Elway. He retired after he won the Super Bowl.
That's right.
Just go out on top. No, this is it's really good. I mean, we could sit here and we could wax poetic about, we're getting this flavor and this flavor and that. Ultimately, when I feel like, and I've said this before, I feel like each intake of the whiskey and of the cigar, it's a kind of a linear experience for me. It starts with I take a sip of the whiskey, I get the flavors from that. I take a puff of the cigar, I get the flavors from that on my tongue. I exhale, I get the flavor of that from my retro, and so I want to just start right over again and just keep going in that same direction.
Yep.
Yeah, the flavors. I mean, it's really good.
It's really good. So one thing I just want to comment on is, because and I kind of commented on this in my review, but I just want to reiterate it on the show, maybe to pat us on the back. I mean, it's not like we're changing the industry or anything, but at the time where we conceived of this show, there was really nothing. I mean, there was some, 1 or 2 cigars in the marketplace that were designed to be paired, but it's interesting that we started the show off, went to the IPCPR, and now all of a sudden I mean, it is a literal explosion. I guess that'd be figurative. My bad. Figurative explosion of cigars blowing people up. Of cigars to pair out there. You know, whether it's to pair with coffee, whether it's to pair with bourbon, which is pretty popular, whether it's to the five show series we do with beer. Boy, birds, calm down.
They are getting fired up.
Wow, they're like, man, I'm so happy. The sun's out, it's warm. Me too, but calm down. But as far as I'm aware, this is the only cigars that are out there specifically blended to pair with whiskey, and I find that interesting, given that Americans are huge consumers of blended whiskey. Americans are huge consumers of bourbon. I'm really quite surprised that there's not more cigars geared towards that. But I'm glad that DRAM Cigars has done this, because this is fun.
My retort to that is just going to be my opinion. But as a cigar smoker, when I see something that a cigar that is advertised as this pairs well with beer, or it's made to pair with beer, I'm skeptical. If it's made to pair with something, I'm skeptical right off the bat, because to me that off the bat it says maybe the cigar is not good enough to stand on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that matter? Is the question. Does it really matter if the Smoking Monk IPA and paired phenomenally with those IPAs that we had? Does it matter if the cigar is good by itself? I don't care, because I'm probably never going to smoke it on its own.
Yeah.
But I think initially I'm a bit skeptical. And I think the first one that I can remember was the Casada Oktoberfest. And while I was skeptical, I was excited about it, and I ran out and bought some the second they came out. And when I did pair it, the first thing I paired it with, what year was that? This must have been 2012, 2013, and I paired it with this is Sam Adams Oktoberfest release, which I look forward to every year. I really do enjoy that beer. And I thought it was great. So even though I've had good experiences in the past, if I see it, I'm still a little bit skeptical for whatever reason.
No, I think I think it's healthy to have a little bit of skepticism, because you're wondering in your mind, you're like, well, is the pairing a crutch? Is it just because you're missing a significant component? You've incompletely blended the cigar. But as you say, for me, I don't care if I enjoy the cigar paired with something, and that's an enjoyable experience, and I'm getting my money's worth. And speaking of money, I was looking around to see what these go for, because legitimately I'm looking to do a box split, because I'm a crazy man. And I gotta say, man, the Toro is very reasonably priced. I think I was looking on Cigar Coop, because Coop did a great write-up of these right after the IPCPR. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. And he listed the MSRP as $870. I'm like, that's a good price point. Sub $9 is a good price point for something like this. And I went looking at Corona Cigars and Famous and Cigar.com. Man, there's some good deals to be had out there. These can be picked up for less than that. So check out your local B&M. Check out some of the online suppliers, because they're priced really well. And after I saw the price, I was like, yeah, that makes buying a 20 that much easier for me.
Now, I do want to ask you, because in your review, I think did we determine that you smoked the Toro, or you had the 6x60? Because I can see you're smoking the 60 now.
I'm definitely smoking the 60, which I forget the name they call it. I'm definitely smoking the 6x60. So I'm pretty confident that I flubbed on my review, and I was actually smoking the Toro, which is the 6x52. I think we determined that these came in 4 Vitolas. So the one I'm smoking right now is a double Gordo. They call it a Gigantor, which is kind of cool name. So there's 4 Vitolas. There's a Robusto, which is a 5x50. The Toro, which is a 6x52, which is the actual one I reviewed. So I'm gonna have to go back and fix that. My bad. I'm only human. Gigantor, which is a 6x60, and then a Churchill, which is 7x50. Now I gotta say, because I like some of the thinner ring gauges, I would be pretty interested to see this in a Corona, or like a 5x48 or even a 5x46. I'd be curious, and I don't know if they're going to do that, because 4 Vitolas is a pretty good range, but there's a lot of options out there, and check it out because they seem to be available all over the place.
You know what would be really cool is if we had a new Vitola that came out and it was for each particular blend, and it was just called the SOP size.
SOP, son.
And we can just have that be a Lonsdale at a 6x44.
Oh, stop it.
Oh, forget about it. Anyway, the reason I brought that up, I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus. I was curious as to how the 60 is performing and compared to what you smoked before.
So I definitely, it's still good. I think I was getting a lot more subtlety out of the Toro. That just might be my palate. Yeah, I would say between the two, I prefer the Toro. That being said, the Gigantor is priced really well. So if you like a bigger ring gauge cigar, you're getting your money's worth because you could probably go through, drinking responsibly. You could probably go through 2 drams with this cigar comfortably.
Interesting.
So maybe we should. Do you want to move on to our second whiskey here?
Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, I was just curious about that.
No, absolutely, man. So for my second whiskey, I'm actually cheating because I'm going with a whiskey that I've already done, which is the Tomatin 12 French Oak. I like Tomatin. Not a lot of people have heard of them. I'll talk about that in a minute. They kind of fly under the radar because for many years they're really only making spirit for other companies. So they weren't actually really doing their own whiskeys. And then a little while ago they started doing their own whiskeys, and I went to a full range tasting from the 12 up to their, I think they had their 40. And they make good whiskey, man. I love their whiskey. Competitively priced because no one's buying it yet because, they don't know. But it's good. Getting my whiskey burps on. One thing I don't think I mentioned, the Glendronach is a Speyside distillery. Not that necessarily matters, but we'll get to that in some of our later shows. I kind of went a little deep on my choices here. The Tomatin is a Northern Highlands. It's a Highlands whiskey. Tomatin was founded in 1897, but went bankrupt in 1906 and then resumed operations in 1909. They list their water source, which I always appreciate. I'm going to do my terrible Gaelic impression. It's Allt na Frí Burn. So that's their water source. Water source is extremely important for Scotch whiskey production, all whiskey production. They use a monstrous 12 wash stills and 11 spirit stills. Now, that's an unusually high number, and I'll talk about that in a second. What's even more interesting is that it's an uneven number of stills, so their number of wash stills are not matched to their number of spirit stills. I don't know why that is. I'm not smart enough, but it's interesting. They produce 5 million liters of spirit a year, which is 1.3 million freedom gallons. So that's a lot. I mean, that is a lot of whiskey, or a lot of spirit. Now, what's interesting is back in the 1970s, when the whiskey industry was at its height, they had peak production of 12 million liters, which, I mean, that's crazy. Again, if you haven't heard about it before, that's because their spirit was in their produced Scotch used to be used predominantly for blends. They were really never sold on their own. Company was liquidated in 1985, then bought in 1986 by Takara Shuzu and Akara and Company, which is marked the first Asian owners of a Scotch whiskey distillery in Scotland. Obviously, since then, there's a lot more. I think the last time I looked, something like 20% of the distilleries in Scotland are now owned by Japanese whiskey companies, and it sounds like for the better, frankly, because they're happy to let them do what they do and just give them money to do it. They're also, interestingly enough, the first distillery to implement what's called a lauter mash tun. And a lauter mash tun is a twisting knife-like device that sort of cuts into the mash. And why that's relevant is because up until that point, they were sort of using a hand rake and just moving the mash around by hand. And they sort of, I don't want to say revolutionized, but certainly evolutionized that process to something a little bit different. So that's what I'm drinking. I'm going to hold it up because it's kind of a really cool sort of golden amber color. I love this Scotch. I'm going to drink it. I'm going to nose it, and while you talk about what you got for number 2.
Well, okay, guys, get ready for a letdown because I have nowhere near that amount of information. But I went with kind of a standard Glenmorangie original. 10-year-old. Now this is, if you go to dramcigars.com and you look at the pairing recommendations for DRAM number 1, this is the recommendation. This is the main one. Glenmorangie, 10-year-old. I do have some info here. Some info coming from their website. Some tasting notes and the aroma. You get sense of citrus and ripening peaches, softened by the aroma of vanilla. Which, on the nose, the Glenmorangie and the Glendronach. Is that how you say it?
Glendronach.
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 Very similar nose. And really, the profiles are a little bit similar. I think the Glendronach was a little bit more complex. And if I could go and do this over again, I'd probably do the Glenmorangie first, but not by much. Very similar profiles. Glenmorangie, let me see if I can give you guys some more information. It comes from the Northern Highlands region, and I could give you the longitude and latitude if you like. 6 wash stills and 6 spirit stills. Now, is that a lot?
That's a lot. I mean, most distilleries run 2 and 2, so any more than 2 and 2 is a lot.
Let's see. They were founded in 1843, but production didn't start until 1849. They're still active. We've got the water source here. It's the Tarlogi Springs, whatever that means. They do 600 million liters of pure alcohol per year.
600,000.
600. Or sorry, no, 6 million.
6 million. Okay.
Did I say 600 million?
You said 600 million. I'm like, that would make them a very large company. Hey-o.
No, 6 million. It's the ownership. Let's see, since 2004, it's owned by Moet Hennessy, and Glenmorangie.com is their website. They make a ton of different ones. This is just their standard intro 10-year-old. I really enjoy the Glenmorangie La Santa.
Oh yeah.
That's a really nice bottle. I picked up a bottle of that around Christmas last year. I tend to get most of my alcohol around Christmas. I buy some for myself because it's usually when I run out, but then I get a bunch for Christmas that year. So I run out kind of around the next year, and so I have to buy some more. But between you and me, I went through that bottle like over the Christmas holiday, and it wasn't because I dislike my family and I feel the need to be drunk around them all the time. It was just that I liked it so much. It was really good. And we happened to have a lot of gatherings and get-togethers, so it made it a lot of opportunity for me to drink. But so yeah, the Glenmorangie 10, pretty basic. I mean, the price point is between $25 and $35, I think, depending on where you are.
Very affordable.
Yeah, it's an affordable deal. I took a few sips and I did a little bit of tasting while you were talking about yours, John, and I can see why this is their go-to pairing. Why they say here pair with this, because it's got the citrus on the front, it's got a little bit of woody note on the end, and it's exactly what they pair this cigar for. It's perfect. The pairing is almost perfect. The only thing that I like about this that's a little bit better than the previous pairing is I feel like this pairing puts the cigar a little bit more on a pedestal. It elevates some of the flavors that I'm getting out of the cigar. It elevates that creaminess, the creamy texture that I'm getting. It elevates that little bit of cedar that I'm getting out of it, because the woody notes that I'm getting from the Glenmorangie, while there's probably it's like more of an oaky finish, it still has that cedary type notes to it, and it really does blend together, meld together really well. I can see the basic concept of this cigar is to be obviously paired with whiskeys in this general grouping. I'm curious to see. I know that the next one that we're doing is a cask strength, so I'm curious to see how that's going to play. But these first two pairings have been phenomenal.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of what I think is going to be difficult to pair. excuse me, to balance with whiskey is you are balancing on a bit of a teeter-totter. That is, you're going to lean either towards a cigar or towards a whiskey, because whiskeys do have a lot of character to them. And I think you know, it's tough. It's tough to just balance it perfectly. So you're going to end up going one way or the
Absolutely.
other.
Yeah.
I think with the Tomatin 12 French oak, it definitely leans towards the whiskey, which I'm okay with. And you can read about it more in the review, but it's far more complex than the Glendronach. It's more citrusy. There's more vanilla notes. There's caramel notes. There's toffee. There's some stone fruit in there, like almost a peach. It's really good. Now it is a bit more of a heater. It's 46% instead of 43%. Non-chill filtered, so the core elements of the whiskey are not filtered out to make it not cloud up when you add water. And it is produced in little quality or little quantity, not quality. Only 12,000 bottles were produced. So if you like the description and you're a whiskey hound, you should pick it up because the bottles aren't going to last very long. A bit of a frog in my throat. The tasting notes from Tomatin are malty biscuits, vanilla, coconut, red fruits, white peach, and cashew nuts with fresh rocket.
Wait.
I think rocket is a type of UK candy. Have you ever had the rockets?
No, but I was going to ask, what's a multi-biscuit?
It's a multi-biscuit. You never had a multi-biscuit?
It's like more than one biscuit?
Yeah, oh man, they're crazy about their biscuits. You kidding me? Go to a British British store. They have like 500 different types of biscuits, and they have like wheat biscuits and biscuit thins, and they have like honey biscuits and multi biscuits.
So when I hear biscuits,
yeah.
I think biscuits and gravy. It's not that type of biscuit.
No. So when they say biscuits, they mean crackers.
So like a multi-grain cracker. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you for dumbing it down for the American.
No. I mean, it's word.
No, I needed it.
Yeah. Now, some of that is natural for me because I think Canada has more of a cultural tie to England these days than the United States does. So there's a lot of food that we get that is specifically English that we eat on a regular basis. So for us, it's kind of normal. Also list candy, sweets, toffee, and butterscotch coming through as the whiskey warms up. And I would agree, the Tomatin 12 French oak is wonderfully complex, reasonably priced, pairs brilliantly with the DRAM Cigar 1. Although I have to say, after having the Glendronach, I'm really torn because that Glendronach really emphasized and highlighted the cigar, whereas the cigar is really highlighting the whiskey. So, different sides of the coin here. But it's delicious, and definitely could sit back and enjoy this all night.
One thing I will say about the Glendronach that is superior to the Glenmorangie is the Glendronach was a lot smoother. The Glenmorangie has a bite at the end, and
I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, what's the Glendronach? Is that something that I can go down to my liquor store and find?
Yeah, in fact, it should be very similarly priced to the Glenmorangie. I mean, it's an entry-level whiskey, so by that it's not a disparaging thing. It just means that it's designed to be, it's produced in large quantity. For an American audience, it should be, I think between $40 and $50. And I think maybe the reason it's a little smoother, or I would describe it as a less alcohol bite, is because of that extra 2 years of aging versus the 10-year on the Glenmorangie.
That's why I have you here on the show, man. That's perfect. That's a perfect explanation. And when you say it's more of like an entry level, I'm all about entry level when it comes to booze, for example. I mean, with some of the stuff that you're talking about, and I've seen your online checklist of your whiskey collection, and it's ridiculous.
I have 1 or 2 bottles.
I've probably got, I listed them out in an email for you today. I probably got like 6 or 7. So I have a decent little rotation going, and there's always something in my rotation that is more of an entry level. And right now it's Glenmorangie, and I think I got a bottle of Chivas 12, which is it's blended, but that's also kind of in the rotation. That was a gift as well. When this Glenmorangie is done, I'm going to pick up a bottle of the Glendronach, because I like that flavor profile. It's that lighter profile that you get from some of these entry-level style scotches that I really enjoy. Sometimes that's what I want. Sometimes I'm looking at my bar and I'm thinking, well, I've got an Oban 14 and I've got an Arbalor 16. Those are probably my two of my better bottles, to give you an idea of where my price range is when I'm going out and buying something. But sometimes I want something a little bit more simple than that, and that's kind of where these fall. I'm really leaning towards the Glendronach, but if I were having a Glenmorangie and I hadn't paired it with the Glendronach already, I'd still be perfectly happy because this pairing's great.
Yeah, and I mean the interesting thing is, I'm not a quote unquote whiskey snob. That is, what was interesting is when I was looking at the recommended pairings, the recommended bottles, I went, got that, got that, got that, got that, got that, don't have that, finish the bottle of that, have that, have that. So, I do have a lot of, like, the Glenfiddich 12. Yeah, man, I've got 2 bottles of that. The Glenmorangie, I've got on my shelf. The Glendronach, I've got on my shelf. These are all whiskeys that I enjoy, because the interesting thing for me about whiskey is that you've got a bottle that is a different flavor combination, and if you're looking for that, that's what it is. And you can only really get that in that particular that bottle, because if you go up to a 15 or you go to a 17, it's totally different, just like cigars. And I enjoy a lot of the entry level stuff. I mean, obviously it's good on the pocketbook for sure, but some of the flavors, maybe I'm not looking for something that's going to bowl me over with complexity. I like a Connecticut cigar. You know me, I like those triple Ligeros. Woo, Ligero. But I like the Connecticut too, because sometimes I just want a nice, good smoke that I don't have to think about. I could just sit back and enjoy it, enjoy that creaminess, and it's good. I mean, I don't need a flavor bomb necessarily.
Yeah, not all the time. No, I agree. I agree. I think if I had a little bit more space to store my booze, I think my whiskey collection would be a little bit bigger. Because I'm the same way with books. I like to buy them. I don't necessarily read them, but I'll buy them. I've got a ton more books than I've actually read. Although my library just grew exponentially. And I'm actually reading a great book, but where that's off topic. But I do like to, if I were sitting out and I had, I'd have the bottle of the Glendronach open. I'd have my my DRAM glass there, my DRAM cigar going, and I'd have a book going too, because that to me that's when I want to decompress. And I'll be honest, man, writing cigar reviews and watching baseball for a living can be stressful sometimes.
Yeah.
And I want to decompress, and that's how I do it. I'm really interested in this last pairing, though. Let's move on.
All right. So before we do, just a reminder to our audience, you're listening to Sharing Our Pairings, episode 27, DRAM Cask number 1 cigar, sponsored by DRAM Cigars. We are broadcast live on cigarfederation.com. We are also available on podcasts. Thanks very much to our podcast listeners. We'll get to our giveaway a little bit later, because we had promised a giveaway last week, and we have some lucky winners. I know you guys have probably been listening to the show saying, "Where's my cigars? Where's my cigars? Did I win? Did I win?" And you maybe you won. I don't know. We'll get to it, but we've got one more whiskey to go through.
You just made all of our podcast listeners sound really creepy.
I know they're sitting there. I know they're listening, and we're 50 minutes into the show, and they're like, "Dude, I know I put my entry in. Did I win?" And it's like, we'll get to you. I promise I'll give you some cigars. We'll get to you.
I picked my winners last week live, and I still haven't sent them out. So we're in the same boat. But those guys already know they won.
So we're moving on to our third whiskey of the night, our third and last heater. And this is a bottle in a company that is near and dear. This is one of the staples of my, well, not this particular bottle, but Auchentoshan is one of the staples of my cabinet. And if you ever come to my cabinet and don't drink all my whiskey,
that sounded real personal.
Yeah, it's pretty personal. I don't let a lot of people see my cabinet. The Auchentoshan 3 wood is always in my cabinet. I always have a bottle of 3 wood because it is delicious. But that's not what we're pairing tonight, because the 3 wood is more of a Cask number 2, DRAM Cigars Cask number 2 whiskey. So this is the Auchentoshan Valenche, and you were mentioning, you're like, that's a weird name, and it is a weird name. And I'm just going to move my whiskey around here.
It is, but I will say, you keep talking about three woods, and that reminds me that I need to get back out on the golf course because I haven't played. And really, in California, you could have been playing golf all year. There was never a time when it was too cold or too wet to play golf, outside of like maybe today. About 3 weeks of rain tops, 2 weeks. But I have a 3-wood, tailor-made 3-wood, and it's old. But man, no matter what, it doesn't matter how I'm swinging the clubs that day. When I hold that club, I feel so confident, and I crush it every time. Doesn't matter if I'm off the tee or if I'm off the fairway because I screwed up my tee shot and I'm off the fairway with 3-wood. I just crush it with that club. But that's neither here nor there.
I think we all have a club in our bag like that. I love that particular club that I have. But I have not been golfing because it is not golfing weather. There's still a bit of snow kicking around here. Hopefully we'll have that all gone within the next little while. But moving right along. So Auchentoshan actually has it's Gaelic, and it means corner of the field. I don't know if that's relevant to anyone listening, but it's kind of cool to me. Auchentoshan is a lowland distillery. They're located just north of Glasgow. They were founded in 1825, so again, pretty old distillery. Their water source is the Loch Cochno, so it's an actual loch. They have bought that.
Like Nessie?
Like Nessie, yeah. So their water sources, loch really just means lake. So you'll see there's a lot of water sources in Scotland called lochs, and loch really just means lake in Gaelic. But their water source is extremely important to Scotch production, and so they've bought it. They own that land. Oh. They only have one wash still, one middle still, and one spirit still. So not a lot. And yet they produce 1.65 million liters of Scotch, which is 435,000 Freedom gallons, so that's a fair amount. They're only one of 3 remaining lowland distilleries, so the lowland distilleries have really been falling off. One of my favorite closed distilleries is Little Mill. If you checked out our Sharing Our Pairings number 10, I think I had the Little Mill 21 on that show. Phenomenal whiskey. But moving right along, so there's only 2 other lowland distilleries, Bladnoch and Glenkinchie. So Auchentoshan, Bladnoch, and Glenkinchie are the only 3 remaining lowland distilleries in Scotland. Now, they list triple distillation. So most whiskey is double distilled. Triple distillation is kind of more of an Irish thing, which leads me to believe that Auchentoshan was probably originally founded by people from Ireland who were in the Irish whiskey business, because triple distillation is really an Irish thing. Every distillation you run the spirit through takes a little bit of the character away from the whiskey. It does increase the alcohol percentage, but it does remove a little bit of the character from the spirit. So they are triple distilled. I think all of their whiskey is actually triple distilled. They founded in 1825, rebuilt in World War II, bought in the 1980 by Morrison Bowmore. Morrison Bowmore was then acquired by Suntory. We talked about Suntory in our last show, so Japanese ownership. Suntory also owns Glengarioch. And I already talked about the Auchentoshan 3-wood, which is their other sort of signature line. The Valenche is a limited production. Valenche is a copper pipette. It's a very huge copper pipette that they put into a cask to take a sample out of to test and taste. So it does have a meaning to it, and essentially the idea behind this is that they've taken their that's awkward. They've taken the Auchentoshan cask, the classic Auchentoshan, and they've taken that and they've put that into to make it a limited edition product. So this is another limited edition product. Now what's interesting is that you'll notice there is no age statement. No age statement. Now, if you've been paying attention, I know you have, you know that it has to be at least 3 years old. It could be older than that, but it has to be at least 3 years old. Now, there's a lot of kerfuffle in the industry as companies are moving to no-age statement whiskeys. We talked a little bit about that on the Japanese whiskey show. My position on no-age statement whiskeys is I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I care about whether it tastes good, and I care about what it costs. If it sucks, I'm not going to drink it. If it's expensive and sucks, I'm definitely not going to drink it. I do not care whether it says 21 in the bottle, whether it says 15 in the bottle, or whether it doesn't have an age, because at the end of the day, I care about how it tastes. So that's my position. It is a non-chill filtered whiskey. It is cask strength. What does cask strength mean? It means it was taken from the cask and put in the bottle. No water was added. This is 57.5%. It
Ooh,
is a
doggy.
heater. Now you can absolutely add water to this, and in fact, if you drink whiskey on a regular basis, I absolutely recommend trying a whiskey without water and then trying it with water because it does change the flavor. If we were doing a different show, I might suggest adding water, but we're not going to do that. What have you had a chance to take a couple sips yet?
I have, but I'm going to ask a question. You can go ahead and take a pull off that. I'll talk about it a little bit.
Oh God,
It is
it's so good.
it's really good, and it's very different
Yeah.
than what we've experienced. It's stronger, duh. The flavors are a bit stronger, and
Yeah.
it brings out a smokier feeling from the cigar as well. So it really, in a way, kind of transforms the entire experience from what we were having before. And it's interesting, and that's one thing I love about the show is, I mean, the trial and error aspect of it. While our trial and error is a bit confined with this show because we had pretty good parameters as to where we should be, I feel like this particular choice that John made, and thank you for making it, is pushing those boundaries that the cigar can handle. And I like that aspect of it. And in a way, it tells me that this cigar is a bit more dynamic than we were giving it credit for with these first two pairings. It can handle more. It's a Connecticut wrapper cigar. It's mild. Maybe it's creeping into that mild plus. But the flavors aren't going to blow you away. It's the kind of thing that the average cigar smoker is going to smoke in the morning, maybe with a cup of coffee or something. And I imagine this would pair really well with a creamed and slightly sweetened cup of coffee. It would be great.
Hell yeah.
But this, and you're going to have to tell me the name of this one again, because what is it?
The Valenche. Akantoshan Valenche.
Akatoshan Valenche, not the Grinch, Valenche. This is, I mean, significantly stronger than what we were trying before. And
Yep.
the flavors are significantly more bold. But the cigar stands up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it kind of stands up and puffs its chest out a little bit, and I like that. The question I was going to ask you is, when you said try a whiskey with and without water. So let's say if I'm going to take, doesn't matter what the whiskey is, Oban 14, because it's on the top of my head.
Yep.
I'm going to take some Oban, and I'm going to pour an ounce into two different Glenmorangie glasses, and I'm going to put a little bit of water in one. How much should I put in there?
You want to start with just a couple drops. If you're looking at a whiskey that's 46% or below 46%, you really only want to add a couple drops. Really all you're doing is you're changing the surface tension of the whiskey, you're changing the mouthfeel of the whiskey, and that's where you're going to notice most of the flavor changes. Now, if you're dealing with a cask strength whiskey and 57.5, that's a heater. Anything over 56, it's pretty serious, and you can add a pretty generous amount of water. Start with a couple drops, see if you like it, add a couple more drops, and you really just kind of experiment. You keep adding water. You keep adding water until you decide you don't like it anymore. The one thing I would recommend is not adding ice. If it's your whiskey, you can do whatever you want. The problem with ice is that it does dramatically change the flavor characteristics of the whiskey, and not necessarily for the better. So there's this great guy, Willie Tate, from Jura Distillery, and he had this hilarious story, and the abridged version is that he told this tale of having Claudia Schiffer in a hot bath waiting for him, and he says, and then I just took a bucket of ice and tossed it on her.
Oh, that's a burn.
And he says, that's what you're doing to my whiskey. You're taking a bucket of ice and you're throwing it on my whiskey, man. Why would you do that to a beautiful woman? Why would you do that to a beautiful whiskey? And it's obviously a simplified explanation, but I think there's some validity to it. At the end of the day, we're not whiskey snobs. We're not drink snobs. Drink it the way you like. If you want to add ice, add ice. I'm not going to bust your chops about it. But definitely try it without ice, because I think you're going to get the full character of the whiskey without it.
That description is, first off, quite a visual, and I might have gone with Kate Upton over Claudia Schiffer, although Claudia Schiffer was never hard to look at. But that tells you where my tastes tend to run as far as women are concerned. Anyway,
Moving right along.
I just completely lost my train of thought. And I mean, honestly, can I be blamed? I'm going to think twice about putting ice in my whiskey, and there are certain things that I will put ice in, and I always will. Anything that is like a Lafroig that's really really big. If I'm drinking that and it's really really peaty, really really smoky, it has to be cold for me, and I need it a little bit watered down, and that's the way that I like it. It's like you said, and that's the same thing I'll say about when you're smoking a cigar. I don't care how you smoke it or what you're smoking. You do whatever you want. It's your own business, whether you want to clip it or punch it or you want to use a V-cut. And I still challenge anybody to tell me that there's a real difference. Anyway, I support anybody doing anything the way that they want. And I'll always go back to the story when I was in Ireland, and I think I've shared it on the show before. It was our last night in Ireland, and we were watching a little Irish dance performance thing in our hotel, and I was feeling kind of splurgy, and they had a Jameson. I don't know if it was Jameson Gold or Platinum or something. That was the best Jameson that they had there, and I hadn't. It was one of the few that I hadn't tasted while I was there, and I recommend the Jameson distillery tour if you're ever going to Dublin. And the guy asked me if I wanted ice, and I said yeah, I want ice cube, and he said. So he for those listening, he shook his head and kind of scolded me a little bit. And I don't know if I've told this full story. He actually poured it twice. He didn't give me double pour, mind you. He poured half of it into a glass with a little piece of ice, and half of it without. And he asked me to drink it without first, and I drank it without, and then I drank it with the ice, and he was right. It really does make a difference, and it was better without. So when you're going to the high-end stuff, I'm going to say sack up and don't have it with ice. But this pairing is not my favorite of the three, but I am impressed that the cigar can stand up to this whiskey.
And I think this is a great analogy for the cigar industry when we talk about strength versus body. So in cigars, sometimes strength and body gets confused or merged together, or maybe washed out. Strength is the tobacco strength, the amount of nicotine, the amount that is going to punch you in the nuts with Ligero. Body is how much flavor complexity. The Valenche has a ton of strength. It is 57.5. It is a heater. That is a lot of ABV. For most whiskey drinkers, 57 would be a lot without water, but it's very delicate. It is, to me, it tastes like a toasted creme brulee. It's extremely sweet compared to the first two. There's still some citrusy notes that like maybe just a slight orange zest and even maybe a little bit of smoke on the finish. But it is very subtle compared to even the Glendronach that we first tried. I would say it's subtle, but that ABV is a heater, and I would agree that I think it's bringing out notes in the cigar that were not there with the first two pairings. I'm getting a little bit more woody out of the cigar and a little bit of almost a peppery note, which is surprising. I mean, this is a Connecticut wrapper, double Connecticut, so presumably, like you said, a Connecticut wrapper and a Connecticut binder. I would not expect pepper out of it, so it's a different experience. If it's something different to the table.
And I like the way, I'm going to take a real quick sip of water though. I like the way that you described the flavors that you're getting from this Valinch.
Valinch. V-A-L-I-N-C-H. Valinch.
Your N's and your R's look very similar.
Yes.
Valinch. I apologize, but we've had a fair amount of alcohol at this point. The way you're describing the flavor and how strength and flavor can get confused, and I talk about this in my reviews a lot, how inserting strength unnecessarily into a cigar can, in my opinion, unnecessarily, can drastically change the flavor profile you're getting. With this Valinch, I'm getting that strength, and it's kind of blowing me out because my palate isn't as refined as yours. I'm not gonna, and especially after where we are, I'm not getting those sweet creme brulee notes like you are. I'm getting that strength from it, and I'm getting some smoky notes. I'm getting the obvious stuff, and I've felt this way about cigars for a long time. When you have a cigar that has a ton of strength in it, it's going to blow out some of the more delicate flavors.
Yep.
Which is why you tend to not get those cigars that have a ton of strength, but still have that, delicate imbalance of flavor to them. And when I find those cigars, I freak out about them. And there was one from Nomad this past year. This is the C276 that I thought had a ton of strength, but it also had a lot of nice complexity to it. Anyway, I'm getting off topic a little bit, but it's interesting that you're getting all those extra sweet notes and things. You're saying that it's much sweeter than the others, and I'm not getting any of that at all, because that strength that's hitting me at the end is kind of blowing me out.
And you know what, I would expect that, because I obviously drink full body whiskeys a lot, so I think my palate is more accustomed, just like if
Absolutely.
I was a full bodied smoker.
Absolutely.
So if you're trying the Valencia for the first time, this and after the show, I'd recommend adding some water to it, because I think you're going to get a lot more of the subtlety out of the whiskey. It's going to take some of that alcohol down for you. What I was doing is, you were talking, I was going back to the first two whiskeys, and if you take a nose of that Glendronach now, I mean, to me...
Wait, don't tell me.
All right.
Don't tell me.
Take a nose, because
I have to pour a little bit more because I drank all of it. But you know what? And this is why, I mean, it's funny how the end of these shows always turn into a love fest, because I'm a little bit buzzed. But John is so awesome that he sent me, and you can't really see, but there's still that much left in the bottle, which is a full additional pour that I don't necessarily have to do just for the show. I can enjoy that later on my own and really just enjoy it. So, and he's done that with every, I mean, you've sent me what, 20 different whiskeys?
Yeah, I got more coming too.
Maybe more?
Mm-hmm.
So, again, thank you. Going back to this, let me see what I get. Keep talking, and I'll see what I'm pulling from this.
So I think I always leave a little bit in the glass. This is something that I've been taught at tastings, is to go back, because it does take your nose, your olfactory senses a little bit of time to adjust, and it's interesting how you'll get a lot more out of whiskeys when you go back to it than you initially got in your first pass. And so going back to the Glendronach, what do you think? Do you notice a change at all?
I do notice a change. I don't know if I can articulate it.
Okay.
Originally, like I had mentioned, that the nose on the Glendronach and the Glenmorangie were very clean, and they had that citrus aspect to them, but they also had a mild sweetness to them. There's another level of scent that I'm getting, and I think the only way I could describe it would be woodsy, that I wasn't getting before.
Yeah.
There's an additional depth of scent.
I mean, tons of like a wet bourbon oak.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's what I meant. I mean, it's got more of a woodsy tone to it than it had before. And if it's the the fact that I've had 3.5 ounces of scotch since we've been sitting here, in addition to the cigar, but I did have a full glass of water. The Batman glass is empty, but you can definitely smell a difference. Oh wow! And this is with the Glenmorangie.
Yep.
I'm getting like an almond note in there.
Yeah.
That wasn't there before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost like marzipan.
Yep. Like
you get on a cake.
So for me, off the Glendronach, because I still left a little bit in my glass, I mean, it is almost approaching a Terry's chocolate orange, which is it's a British thing that we get in Canada. So like it's extremely citrusy, like fresh orange rind.
Now, are those chocolate orange things? Are they the ones that you get them and they're like a little ball, and you open up and they break open into little orange slices?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah, I've had that. Like you kind of like pound it on the table and then it falls open.
Yeah, that's right. You smash it on the table.
Yeah. We get that in America every now and again.
Okay.
We got culture.
I mean, there's tons of layers, like you said. There's extra layers that are there that weren't, and the for me, the Tomatin 12. Oh, I mean, oh, it's just unbelievable. It's like it goes to another level with like the citrusy on the Tomatin 12 French oak is just on a whole nother level than when I initially tasted it. Obviously, I can't really go back to the Valenche because we've been drinking it, but it's extremely sweet, like almost sickly sweet off the nose. So if you were to go back, because we're kind of wrapping up here a little bit, what would you say of the three we've done tonight? What would be your favorite pairing?
My favorite pairing was the Glendronach.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I even went back and that little bit that I poured in there, I sipped out, and it's got a little bit more sweetness in there now than it did before. I'm going to seek that out. I've been, since our Japanese whiskey show, I've been looking for the Ichiro's Chichibu Ichiro's peated, and I went to my liquor store, and the guy said, I don't know anything about it, but I'll try to find it, and if I can, I'll get you a bottle. So he's my guy. He's going to try it. And it turns out he's a cigar guy, and so I see a good relationship there.
Nice.
But yeah, this Glendronach, I'm going to be on the lookout for a bottle of this. I like it because it tastes really good. It paired really well with the cigar. I can see myself definitely buying more of these. And when you tell me that I can find them at a deal, that makes me happy. This is the kind of thing that I would buy. I think I'd buy a box of these, and not even blink at it. But what I want to do is try all four of them before I commit to buying too much of any one. And maybe that box of this turns into 5-packs of all of them. And I hope that's the case because I really like this concept. I like whiskey. It's just an excuse for me to spend more money and to rage on my liver a little bit. But that Glendronach, man, that's impressive. I think this Valenche, like Grinch.
Now you know somebody after the show is going to come and correct me and tell me I'm saying it totally wrong.
Well, whatever. It doesn't matter. I get the point. I feel like I would really enjoy that on its own. I think the pairing was fine, and I think if that was the only pairing that I had, I would have been happy with it. But having had these other two previously, I enjoyed those pairings more. I feel like that is probably the superior whiskey of the three.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you. The Glendronach is hands down the winner. Not necessarily the best whiskey, like you said, but I think if I'm a whiskey guy, so if I understand the concept behind what they're trying to do here, to me, hands down, would recommend the Glendronach. It's a great pairing. You can't go wrong. Even if you're a whiskey novice, easy drinking whiskey. They pair brilliantly together, and like you said, I mean, this is the first in the series of 4. So I really hope that we didn't do that thing where we front loaded, and the cask number 1 is the best, and we go back and go, boy, I wish they were all as good as cask number 1, and I don't think that's going to be the case because they've taken and I think a lot of people look at a Connecticut wrapper cigar and say, there's not enough flavor complexity there, and I go, boy, this has really blown me away. I've dropped a 90 on this, really tasty, really enjoyed it. I'm already talking about a box split, so if that's how we start out with the quote-unquote entry level, I'm really, really looking forward to what's in store for cask number 2, cask number 3, and certainly cask number 4.
Absolutely, I'm in the same boat. I'm looking. I've got their little piece of. And this is basically what you're going to see on their website. As you can see here, it gives you each individual, this is cask 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the whiskeys across the top that you want to try and pair it with. So we're going to run the gamut from Scotch to Jack Daniels. So I'm curious to see how that all plays out. Really excited. I was looking forward to this to begin with, having tried this cask number 1 and found it to be a wild success. I'm really looking forward to the rest of them. I'm going to try to go in with the same expectations as I had with this show, which were pretty high to begin with, so I think we're okay. I know we've got those giveaways. We've also got 2 questions that we need to get to.
Let's do it. Let's get those questions.
Okay, so this first question's from Harley Holmes. I mean, God bless Harley Holmes. Steve asks a question for us every week. Let's see, I haven't actually read the question, so I'm going to read it on the fly here. He says, considering you guys have smoked several cigars specifically blended for certain beverage, which we have, and we talked about this a little bit. So
Yep.
do you think those blended cigars are better or worse when compared with a typical pairing? I.e., is the DRAM #1 cigar that we're smoking tonight better with Scotch versus other cigars? So the way that I'm reading his question is, these cigars are blended specifically to be paired. Does that make them the best pairing? It's an interesting question, and I appreciate that question. Do I think they're the best? I mean, I haven't gone out of my way to pair enough with, say, these 3 specific whiskeys to answer that question. That sounds like it would be a really fun thing to do for science. But, you know, are they better? Are they paired? Are they going to be better pairings because they're blended that way? I'm inclined to say yes, but at the same time, having smoked the cigar on its own and realized that this cigar can stand on its own, it makes me wonder, well, some of these other Connecticut shade wrappers that I've smoked and that I enjoy, I mean, how are those going to compare? And the one that always comes to mind when we talk about Connecticut's that I like is the AKA Solace. I really enjoy that cigar. Now, would that pair well with these 3 scotches? I don't know. That one has a bit more of a kick to it. I think that the Valinch, like Grinch, and the AKA Solace would be a very interesting pairing. And I think it'll be a very interesting pairing with the Nomad Connecticut as well. And we've got a couple of those Connecticut's from Victor Vitale that we've been talking about lately. One that's got a little bit more of a kick to it and one that doesn't. So I'm not going to say that they pair better, but I will say what it has done is opened up my eyes to the fact that a Connecticut cigar doesn't just need to be paired with a creamed and slightly sweetened cup of coffee. It can be paired with a Scotch too, and I never would have thought that.
I think, and appreciate Harley asking that question, because I think it's a really good question on a number of levels. I think for me, you know, we've done 27 shows. I've done a ton of pairing on my own. I mean, I pair a couple, 2-3 times a week now. Researching hard for our audience. I hope you guys appreciate it. It's hard work. You've seen my Instagram. Check it out. It's hard work. I think for the average cigar smoker, and this is not a diss, I think for the average normal guy out there who's not going to do 27 shows worth of research, this is a no-brainer. You can say, listen, I want to pair a cigar with a whiskey. I like whiskey. I like my Scotch. What can you recommend? This is a no-brainer. You know you're guaranteed to pick up a DRAM Cask #1, pair it with a couple of these whiskeys, and have a great experience. Are you going to have the same experience with some other Connecticut? Maybe, but maybe not. And, you know, we talk about budget, and I know we get a lot of crap from it sometimes from the manufacturers, but the average cigar smoker is not going to drop $300 on whiskey to try out different Connecticut's with their whiskey. They want to pick up something, maybe they want to sit on their deck and enjoy it. This is a guaranteed experience. You drop your $8 or $9 for a DRAM Cask 1. We've got a list of whiskeys now that you can pair it with, and you know you're going to have a good time. If you like that particular whiskey, you know it's going to pair really well with this cigar. Again, is that true of other types of cigars? Don't know. You are taking a risk. That isn't to say you shouldn't try it, but I think there is some value, and we don't talk about this enough. There's value to the fact that this was explicitly blended to pair with whiskey. That's the whole point. That's what Joe envisioned for this pairing. He wanted to make it work with whiskey, and it does. So we can say with confidence, this works. And I think that would be my answer.
That's a really good point. I think I'm going to take a little bit of credit for that because I gave you plenty of time to think about it.
Thank you.
But no, I think that's a great point. Does the fact that this cigar was blended to be paired with these particular whiskeys, does it make it a better pairing? Maybe, maybe not. But it takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
It puts you in a position to succeed. Getting back to some of my more corporate training. You want to take your people, depend on their skills, and you put them in a position where they're going to succeed, and it's better for everybody. I think that's exactly what they're doing here. They're taking this blend. They said, you know what, we're going to blend specifically to pair with this. We know it's going to work, and it does work because we've tried it. So here it is. We're going to make it available to the public, and we'll give you kind of an outline of what you should pair with it, and where your pairing should sit. And I think we did a really good job. And I'm going to pat John. I'm going to pat you on the back because this was more you than me. I just kind of showed up. But going from the Glendronach to the Glenmorangie to me wasn't a big step. I mean, they're similar whiskeys. I think the Glendronach was a little bit. It was a bit more complex. I really enjoyed that whiskey. But then going up to the Valinch is you push the envelope, and I said that already. You took this pairing, and you're like, well, this is basically supposed to pair with these. But what if we just push it a little bit more? How's that going to work? And I'm glad that we did that because it still did work. It didn't work quite as well as the first two, but it just showed that these cigars, while they have put them in a very specific category, you can still stretch that. And I'm getting a little bit verbose here. We're kind of going on, and we're at about an hour and 20 minutes, so I'll stop. But yeah, I think to answer your question, Steve, it really does. It gives you a nice platform from which to work. If you want a cigar to pair with a particular whiskey, then here you go. It's already laid out for you. And then when you try it, you can say that was great. Maybe I'll try these other cigars and try to pair moving forward. Or you just realize that it was so damn good that you don't want to try even pairing anything else.
Exactly.
We got a second one here from Jason Myers, and we touched on this a little bit, but I'll read it anyway. Jason Myers again. He says, "Do you add a little bit of distilled water to your whiskey?" He says, "I went to a tasting and they had us take a couple of tastes of the whiskey and then added a tiny bit of distilled water to dilute the whiskey. Although I don't think it dilutes the whiskey. You were describing it in a different way. They said it would help us notice more flavors." We touched on that, but maybe touch on it again, John, just a little bit.
Sure, and I think, and maybe because we are getting a little long, I'll cut my story here short. But Jason brings up a really good point, and that is don't add tap water to your whiskey. For the love of God, do not we went on and on and on about the magical properties of the water sources that they're buying in Scotland, and for you to go add chlorinated crap tap water to your whiskey, there's some Scot who's dead and long in his grave who's rolling over that you would do that. So add filtered spring water or distilled water because you're not looking to change the character of the whiskey. You're just looking to it's called opening it up. And even if you're an experienced whiskey drinker, I still add water to new whiskeys to try and find extra character to that whiskey that I can't otherwise pick up. And the thing is, distillery masters in Scotland will water their whiskey down to like 30% as they keep digging and digging and digging to find all of the flavor levels that are there. So the 2 or 3 things I would recommend. First of all, as Rob, I think, suggested, do a half pour, one in one glass and one in the other, because once you add water, you can't take the water out. That's number 1. Number 2, I've heard a really good recommendation. I apologize, I don't remember who to attribute it to, but the other thing you can do is take a little bit of water in your mouth and then take a sip of whiskey. And by doing that, you don't change the whiskey that's in your glass, and you can control how much water is being added to the whiskey without changing the original beverage, because again, you can't take the water away. And of course, the third and most important thing is don't be afraid to try. I like I said, I do with all my whiskeys. There are whiskeys that absolutely change and I think improve with water. Cask strength means that you're getting the full unwatered down whiskey, so there is some value in adding water, I think, if only to see what else is there. But don't be afraid to add it to a whiskey that's 40% or 43%, because we're not going to tell you how to enjoy your whiskey.
Absolutely. Good answer to a good question. And if I were better at this whole job of taking on questions, I would have brought this up when we talked about it before. So there you go.
So before we wrap up, because I've kept our podcast listeners waiting, and
they had to earn it. They had to earn it.
So they're drinking their whiskey somewhere, or they're drinking their beer somewhere, and they're like, "Come on, surgeon, give me the winners." So we have a lot of podcast listeners. We have a lot of podcast listeners. The Japanese Whiskey Show is one of our most popular shows in recent times, and thank you
Nice.
very much for tuning in. It was not easy to pick listeners that won. Because I like to shake it up, I said there was going to be 3 winners. I've changed it. There's going to be 4 winners.
Boom.
In no particular order, and you don't know what you're going to get. You're either going to get the Smoking Monk sampler, or you might get a little something something from the Surgeon.
Uh-oh.
Or you might get a Smoking Monk of Esteli and a little something something from the Surgeon. You don't know. You won't know until that box arrives at your doorstep. But in no particular order, Chris O, you are a lucky winner. Ryan A, you're a lucky winner. Ian W, who had a really cool anecdotal story, and I appreciated him sharing this. He said he was listening to the show at this club. It's a distillery, Madison Brewery. Madison River. I probably wrote it down wrong. Madison River Brewing in Montana. He was enjoying some of their beers and listening to the podcast. I thought that was a really cool concept. He's sitting there at a brewery enjoying a beer, listening to us prattle on for a couple hours, and he emailed us. So if only because of the story, I would have picked him, but he came up as one of the chosen few. And last but not least, Trip, who very active in our chat. Trip was actually one of the first guys to email in, so I'm glad he won. So Chris O, Ryan A, Ian W, Trip W, you guys will be getting either a Smoking Monk sampler or a Cigar Surgeon sampler. Look for that in the next couple weeks. It might take me a couple days to get that out because I'm up in frozen northern Canada, but they'll be coming out in the next couple days ish.
Yeah, Trip is a good guy, and he's coming on the Cigar Federation trip. I'm looking forward to meeting
Nice.
Trip on the trip.
Trip on the trip.
So it is Madison River Brewing.
Okay.
And it looks like currently on tap, they've got a few different beers currently on tap. They've got a Bates Belgian Orange, Black Ghost Oatmeal Stout, which sounds great.
Oh yeah.
Copper John Scotch Ale, which I've seen a few Scotch ales and I've picked up a few Scotch ales and I do enjoy them.
I think that's what he said he was drinking, actually.
Yeah, and those sound pretty good. The Dropper IPA and the Elk Hair ESB. So it looks like it actually looks like it's available a little bit up there in Canada on the other side of the country from you. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. Madison River Brewing Company. I didn't know anything about them, but the Black Ghost Oatmeal Stout. I'm gonna look for that because that sounds good.
Giddy.
But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. Obviously we go out of our way to mention the podcast listeners because there's just a ton of you guys, and we really do appreciate you guys checking in. And moving forward, when you're listening to our show, let us know if you're at a brewery or if you're at some kind of tasting or something, or you've got one coming up, or you just went to one. Tell us your story. We'll talk about it on the show. It's that gives us some fun stuff to talk about. And I didn't know anything about Madison River Brewing Company, and now I do. So we all get to learn a little bit from that. So appreciate you guys, and I'll go back to John here while I sip on a little bit more of the Glenmorangie.
Tore up. So Rob's going to be busy this week. Of course, he's done Sharing Our Pairings last week. He is tasked to do Pipe Dummies, Episode 7. We've got a special guest, and I'll kick back to you in a second to talk about that. So that's tomorrow night at a regular time of 8 p.m. Eastern, so tune in for that. And then since we've got our Google issues resolved, I'm looking at you, Google. We've got Jason Wood of Miami Cigar Company, which we're looking forward to on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. So we've got Rob is busy this week, shows back to back to back. Tune in next Monday for Mombacho at special time. Those guys are out of Canada. Hell yeah.
Hey-o.
And then Bats and Pipes on Wednesday. So we're not going to actually return because we got a lot of scheduling complexity here. So I think our next Sharing Our Pairings, which is going to be on the DRAM Cigars Cask number 2, is not until April 29th, which is the Wednesday. at our regular time of 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So hang in there with us. We'll be back in a couple weeks, but there's lots of shows in the meantime. You want to talk a little bit about the pipe show?
Yeah, I'll let everybody know. John, we haven't really talked about this much offline, and maybe this is something our listeners will want to chime in on. If they really have a preference, if we do the show live or if we do something pre-recorded, we could pre-record some shows and be a little bit more regular with when they're made available. If we do them live, because we know we've got the live listeners out there as well. If we do them live, those Wednesdays can get a little bit funky for me. So maybe that's something we'll talk about offline. But I just thought I'd point it out. Tomorrow on Pipe Dummies, full week for me. I got 3 shows. Tomorrow we've got Jonathan Turner, who Logan set this up, but I had the pleasure of chatting with Jonathan a little bit today, and he's got a really good sense of humor. This is going to be a fun show. But if you were at all interested in pipes, we've got like 2 or 3 pounds of pipe tobacco that we're going to be giving away. And if you're a pipe smoker, you know exactly how much pipe tobacco that is. We're going to be giving away some Autumn Evening from Cornell and Dial, which I reviewed on Cigar Federation, and is one of my favorite aromatics. It's one of the few aromatics that when you crack open the tin, you get that smell, and if you're a pipe smoker, you know what I'm talking about. And when you smoke it, it tastes the way it smokes, or tastes the way it smells, which is very, very rare when it comes to aromatics. And then we've got, as John mentioned, we've got Jason Wood from Miami Cigar Company coming back this week due to technical difficulties last week, or the week before, whenever it was. We've got him coming back this week, and we've got 3 boxes of cigars to give away. So definitely check those shows out as well. Giving away some of the Nestor Miranda collection. I know we've got the Connecticut, which would pair really well with these first 2 whiskeys that we did, the Habano and the Maduro, which the Maduro pairs really, really nicely with like a nice chocolate stout. Forget about it. So those are going to be some fun shows. And I can keep talking.
I'm just sitting here enjoying the heck out of the cigar, man. I am honestly in a zen place, enjoying this cigar and enjoying this whiskey. This has been a great, enjoyable show for me. Thanks again to DRAM Cigars for sponsoring us. We'll look for us again on April 29th. And as we always close our show, want to make sure you guys are drinking better and drinking less. Thanks for listening in.